Hi everyone, welcome to another training session on decisions. Today I'll be talking about the different authentication options which is available in decisions, and as well as I'll give you an overview on SSO or single sign-on. I had already briefed about authentication and authorization of users in the video on decisions architecture. So if you haven't yet seen it, please have a look at it so that it will serve as a foundation for you for this particular session. So let's start with our session for today. Like I mentioned in the session on the overview of on decisions architecture, every user, be it an end user, be it an IT, business analyst, and even guest users, need to have some kind of authentication and authorization so as to use the decisions tool and its varied features. Now, one of the ways to achieve that is to use decisions backend database to create accounts and its respective passwords and use it as a means for authentication and authorization of users. I'll quickly jump into my decisions instance and showcase to you what I've just explained. Now, to create a new account in decisions, you have to go to the system section, and under the system section, you'll have the security folder. And under the security folder, you have this accounts subfolder. And when you click on that, you will be able to see all of the different accounts which is currently available in this particular instance of mine. And also you have an option of creating new accounts in decisions. So let's go ahead and create a new account and see. So when I do that, as you can see over here, decisions ask me to provide the email address and the password with which this particular user will be logging into the decisions portal. So let's go and give an email address and a password for this particular user. Since all of the other fields are not mandatory fields, I'm just going ahead and creating this particular account. Now, once this account is created, the email address and the password that I have provided for that user will be saved in decisions backend database and will be used for authenticating the user when he tries to when he or she tries to log into the decisions application. So let's go ahead and check whether this particular user that I've just created is able to log into decisions. Decisions.com. Okay, I provided a long password, I guess. As you can see, the user which I have just created is able to log into decisions using the email address and the password that I have assigned to that user. Now, coming back to my slide, as you can see, there are other outside services or outside technology that we can use for authentication, like Active Directory, SSO, SAML, Okta, Active Directory, etc. So in this session, we'll be talking about these outside or external modules, how we can set them up at decisions, and how we can configure them. Last, we have the SDK or software development kit, wherein we can programmatically build in login sessions and login details for authentication purposes. In this, we basically use the .NET framework for building out these programs. Now, in this session, I'll also be talking about how we can use these different modules like SAML, OpenID, etc. for SSO or single sign-on features in decisions. Now, what is SSO or single sign-on? All of us have used SSO, whether we know it or not. When you try to log into some of the applications, you might have come across the option like login with Google, login with Facebook, etc. These are SSOs. It is simply a way to use external services known as identity providers for authentication. So instead of having multiple login credentials for different applications, we can have one set of credentials to remember and send them out to anyone else. So I'll quickly jump into my decisions instance and walk you through how we can set up these different out-of-the-box modules and how we can use them for enabling the feature of SSO in decisions. Let me jump to my decisions instance. To use these external services or modules in decisions, first you need to install them in decisions. So how you do that is go to this systems section, and under the systems section, go to this administration folder. Under administration, go to this features subfolder. And when you open that, you'll be able to see the list of all the different modules that decisions comes up with. To install any of them, you just need to go ahead and click on it, and the install option will be available to you. As you can see over here, I have installed all of the different modules that I have talked about, like Active Directory, Okta, OpenID, SAML, etc. Now that we have installed the necessary modules for authentication, we need to make some configurations in decisions so as to use them. Let's go ahead and check what these configurations are for each one of them. First, I'll talk about Active Directory. An Active Directory server actually synchronizes users, computer groups, or organizational units to the decisions portal account base. When an Active Directory account is used, the account's AD credentials are authenticated to gain access to the portal. Now let's go ahead and see what are the different configurations that needs to be made for using Active Directory in decisions. So to do that, I'll go to the systems section, under the settings section, under the systems settings folder, under the systems section, and you will be able to see the Active Directory settings over here. I'll go ahead and right click them, and you will be able to see the different AD servers which has been configured. At the moment, I don't have anything set up here. So to create a new server, I'll go ahead and click on this add, and when I do that, you can see the add server window as three major sections. One is this portal settings, the second is the server settings, and third is the synchronization settings. Now there are different options out here, like auto create users on initial login. So this option is basically used to decide whether a user receives immediate access to the portal as soon as an account is created in Active Directory server. If this particular option is checked, the user doesn't have to actually wait for the next synchronous sync cycle to log in using Active Directory. Then there is option of sync only users. So what it does is it will allow you to decide whether only users will be synced to the decisions portal account base, in which case the groups and organizational units will not be synced. Then we have this default group session, wherein we can decide which group inside decisions those particular accounts which is logging into should belong to. And then we have this create new user even if disabled in AD. So what it does is it will allow you to override the Active Directory settings that prevent the creation of new accounts for portal users. And then we have the server settings, which will provide all the details, wherein we will provide all the details about the AD server, which can be used for authentication, like domain name, wherein we provide the IP of the IP or the domain name of the server. Then we have this elevated username, wherein we provide the username of the portal user who has Active Directory server access, and then is password under this elevated user password section. And then last, we have the synchronization settings, and as you will be able to see over here, there are different synchronization options available, like entire domain. So if you select this option, it will synchronize all of the different users, the groups, and the organizational units in the Active Directory server. If you select the option of selected organization units alone, it will sync only the organizational units. And if you select the third option of selected groups, it will synchronize only the groups in the Active Directory server. So once you create this server, it will be available to you over here. You can select that particular server and click on save. Now, the next thing which I want to talk about is Okta. So for you, there are few prerequisites. One is a pre-existing Okta account. The second thing is an Okta subdomain or URL, and the third thing is, as you have seen in this features section, that we need to install not just the Okta module, but then the SAML module should also be installed so as to use Okta in decisions. So now let's go ahead and check what are the Okta settings. So to do that, I'll go ahead and click on this Okta settings over here and click on this edit. And as you can see, it asks for the Okta subdomain or URL and the Okta API token. As well as you can see that we can configure the different flows for syncing the different users and the groups in Okta. Now, you might have a question that why we need to install SAML module as well for using Okta. It is because the Okta module uses the SAML module as it passes the values through the SAML settings. So Okta is basically for a specific or single provider, whereas SAML is a protocol that is used by hundreds of different providers. Next, I'll talk about SAML module in decisions and how we can configure them. So SAML works by sending the user's identity from the service from the identity provider to the service provider, which in this case will be decisions. Now this exchange happens through digitally signed XML documents. Now let's go ahead and see what are the different SAML settings that we have in decisions. Now when I go to this SAML settings, I'll be shown this window and I click on enable. I'll be able to see the list of all the identity providers over here, from wherein I can select the primary identity provider. At the moment, I don't have anything configured. So to create a new identity provider, I can go ahead and click on this add option over here. And when I do that, it opens up a window wherein I need to provide the details about the identity provider that I'm trying to create. So as you can see, I have to provide the name of the identity provider, the login URL of the identity provider, the logout URL, the identity provider ID, the service provider ID. In this case, it will be decisions base portal URL, and at the bottom you have a set of settings which will allow you to take actions when, say for example, unknown user tries to log into decisions. So you can configure these in such a way that when an unknown user tries to log in, an account can be created inside decisions, which will allow them to log into the decisions portal. So as well as there are options like retry login. So if this option is checked, it will wait for the next sync to happen, until which the particular user won't be able to log into decisions. Now the next so before I move on, once you create that identity provider, that particular provider will be listed over here, and you'll be able to select it from this drop down. Once you select them, you can just click on save, and that will be done. Now the last module that I want to talk about is OpenID. So let's go ahead and see what are the different options available in the OpenID settings. As you can see, similar window opens up for me. When I click on enabled, it will show the list of all the identity providers. At the moment, again, I don't have anything configured. So to create these identity providers, I'll click on this add option. And as you can see, there are different details that I need to provide, like the identity provider name, the client ID, client secret, discovery URL, etc. Now, Like I mentioned in the initial part of this session, these modules can be used to configure what do you say, add SSO features in decisions. So say for example, if you are using OpenID, or say for example, if you are using SAML, you can use those modules to configure SSO feature in decisions. And how you do that is, before you make all these different configurations that I have just explained, what you have to do is go over to this particular folder, which is basically the decisions installed folder. So I'll just showcase to you that in case. So I went to my program files. I have my decisions folder over here. I went inside decision server. And when I go inside this decision server folder, at the bottom, you will be able to see a file named as settings.xml file. Open up this particular file. I am opening up with it, opening it with Notepad++, and search for single. There'll be only one item with the name single, and you can see enable single sign-on. So currently it is set as false. You have to make it as true and save it. Once you do that, once this is completed, you have to go ahead and restart your decision server. Once you restart your decision server, you can log in back into the decisions portal, make the necessary settings. Say for example, if you're using SSO along with OpenID, or say for example, if you're using SSO along with the SAML settings, go ahead and make these necessary configurations that I've just explained, and you will be ready to use SSO. So there is one more setting that you have to do in case you are using SAML for enabling SSO in decisions. So that is, you have to go ahead and make a change in the account for which you want to assign SAML SSO. So for that, I'll go to my accounts folder here under the securities main folder. And say, for example, I want to assign the SSO feature to this particular account. So what I have to do is I go click on this edit account, and you'll be able to see this user identifier section. So here you should enter a value which should be used as the value for the identity provider to send as the user ID for this particular account. So this is the extra configuration that you need to make in case you are using SAML for enabling SSO in decisions. So once SSO is enabled in decisions, the login page will be completely different. So currently, if SSO is not disabled, this is the login page wherein we enter the email address and the password for the accounts which is already created in decisions, which will then be authenticated with the data which is there in the backend database. Like I explained to you in the first part, wherein we use decisions backend database for authentication. But if once SSO is enabled, the login page will look something like this, wherein you can use the credentials of a different application and then log into decisions. And likewise, the next thing is you can use the SDK or software development kit in decisions to build in codes in .NET for authenticating a user. Now, let's talk about the different REST authentication services which is available in decisions. Now, if you want to call decisions elements like a flow or a rule or a report, etc. via an API, we shall need to authenticate the user to avail that service. So the first way to use do that is to use your email and password credentials as part of the API call. Credentials can be passed in either through the body of a post request or in the URL of a GET request. But this type of authentication might not be most secure as it requires sending across your credentials over the REST boundary. Next is name session. It is an authentication type in decisions, which is actually tied to an account. So the way it works is you create a name session and map an account to it. And once that is done, it creates a unique session ID, which can then be used to call decisions elements over a REST API boundary. Let me just quickly showcase to you that I'm not going to build anything. I'll just showcase to you what a name session is. So for that, let me log in back to my decisions instance. Yeah, to create the name session, what I have to do is find it once. Yeah, so if you go to this systems section, and under the securities folder, you will be able to see the named sessions subfolder. So if you click on it, you will be able to create a new name session, and you will be able to see the list of the existing name sessions. So I currently have a existing name session. So let me just show it to you. So I have entered a name for the name session, and then assigned the account to which that particular name session should be tagged to. So now if I go ahead and let me create a very simple flow, and I'll name my flow as test flow. Okay, I'm not going to build anything. Say for example, just imagine that there are a few steps here. We have developed a flow over here, and you want to call this particular flow via an API. So what you do is you set up this API service over here, and when you click on done, decisions will open up the integration designer for you. And in this integration designer, you will be able to see the name sessions that we have created. So if you select that name session, you will be able to see the unique session ID, which can then be used for calling this particular flow via an API. Just give a couple of seconds for it to load up. Why it is taking some time. I don't know why it is taking some time. Let me just refresh this and see. Yeah, hopefully it should work now. Yeah, as you can see, for that you have the get URL and the post URL, and this will be that unique session ID which will be created for the name session. And you can see it starts with NS, which stands for name sessions. Now coming back to my slide, the next one we have is JWT, JSON Web Token or auth. So as part of your API call or request, you can send in a token, and then in decisions, you can set up the key to use that token for authentication of that particular API call. You can pass in these tokens as either as one of using either the words bearer or session as part of your request, and the token is used for authentication and authorization of that particular call in decisions. And the last one is this custom module, wherein we use the SDK or the software development kit in decisions to write codes in .NET for authenticating a user for an API call. So this is all that I wanted to cover as part of this particular session on user authentication in decisions. Hope you guys enjoyed this session. Thank you so much.